So Jeff, yesterday we talked about a bunch of M&A stuff. I mean, hot topic in the restoration industry, mergers and acquisitions. What are you seeing in the market? I know we touched on a couple things, but primarily, what are some new market trends that you're seeing from a buyer's perspective in the M&A world in the market?
So I think if we start off high level market, I think we came off a pretty soft year in 2024. So far, first part of 2025, a little soft in terms of claims volume. So I think we're all trying to get our arms around, is this the new normal? Is this not the new normal? But I think overall trends at M&A, I think we're in an upward trajectory. I think interest rates do play an impact on both multiples and the quantity of buyers. And so I see that turning in a positive direction in 25. But honestly, I think 26 will be even more positive, and hopefully moving forward, we can get out of some wars and different things that have no impact at all on restoration. But believe it or not, it actually does have an impact on what your business is worth. And so I think we're heading in the right direction. I think we've got more growth, new entrants coming to market. And so I think ultimately over the next 3 years, I think buyers and sellers, buyers will be able to pay more for a business, I think 2 to 3 years down the road than what we can now. And I think that's good for the industry.
Yeah, I think that's good for everyone. You touched on, new buyers coming into the market. I think there's just a ton of new buyers really coming out of the woodworks. I mean, these PE groups are, they have successful portfolios in HVAC and plumbing, roofing. I guess just the next leap is into the restoration industry, kind of full circle service. In terms of your competition 5, 10 years ago, I know your first acquisition was in 2020, but are you still seeing those same competitors competing on some of the business owners that you're going after? Are you still seeing those competitors being your biggest competitors, or is it new entrants?
It's definitely new entrants. So like 4 or 5 years ago, it was like same 4 or 5 people going after every company that was for sale. And honestly, now out of those, call it 5, there's either 1 or maybe 2. And then there's new entrants that quite honestly didn't exist 2 or 3 years ago. They're competitors that I may know of because of my role, but most of the people in my company would not list them as a top 30 or 40 or 50 competitor because most of the people in my company have never heard of them. Or it's these small private equity groups that are looking to not build out a national platform like an ATI. They're looking to build out this model in a singular state or 3 or 4 states, bundle it up and sell it to someone like myself that wants to roll it up nationally. So you have a lot more smaller entrants coming into market that see how sexy and interesting and stable this industry is compared to other markets.
Yeah, no, I mean, stability is the number one factor. I mean, multiples have remained consistent, but it definitely opens the door for more opportunity for sellers, because when you have new buyers, new opportunities, new players in the market, it allows for the potential for not only finding the right culture fit, but also oftentimes for a higher multiple. When you have 5 main players in this space, I feel like, hey, listen, we're going to control the multiple, which is never good for sellers. So I think that over time, we're going to start to see a ton of new companies come into this market because it is sexy. I mean, the margins are, if in terms of general contracting, a 5 to 7% margin is sexy. Restoration, swinging the same hammer, 10-15%, even better. I would assume, 25, 26, you're spot on. It's definitely going to continue to uptick, and it's exciting for both buyer and seller.
Yeah, I correlate a lot of things to real estate. So I think if you look at the markets, a newer entrant, whether it's a strategic or private equity, may be willing to pay more for a business as they're new to market versus someone like ourselves who have been at market longer, are more strategic, more thoughtful. Anytime you're coming out of the gun and you really want something, you may be willing to overpay for it. You may not be willing to do as much diligence. You don't know what you're getting for. And it's kind of like a professional real estate investor. They're not going to overpay for a business. They're going to do their diligence versus the person that's always wanted to live in that house. I've always wanted that. I'm willing to pay up for it because that's the baby I want, versus someone who's doing this for a living and is being very thoughtful and diligent on the company. And really looking out for the long-term stability of the business as well.
I found it interesting on your 2020 deal, which was your first one with Mark One. You weren't the highest bidder. on that one. And you didn't come out of the gate very aggressive. It was the right culture fit, right, fit for both buyer and seller. But we did talk about some of the things about that business that made it a little questionable, the TPA relationship, and then the customer concentration of being one customer making up 40% of that revenue. Would you do that same deal today as you did back then? Would anything change about that structure? Would you have done, paid a little bit less, paid a little bit more? Walk me through, you kind of, I guess, do you still have the mindset? Did you take the right approach back then? Because like you said, most of these new entrants that are doing their first deal, they're so aggressive to get into the market. They just want that license to hunt. And your first one is always that baby, and we're willing to overpay for it. The diligence is light. But that wasn't the case with you. You said, listen, we're going to stick to our guns. This is the true valuation of this business. We think it's a good fit for both buyer and seller. And eventually buyer agreed and they went with you. I found that interesting.
Yeah, so I'll answer it both ways, yes and no. So I think if you were to ask me, obviously hindsight's 2020, I know how the business has performed. So any of the questions I had, I'd 100% go buy it again. However, if you presented a similar business with the same attributes today, I don't know that we would have bought the business, because I don't know that I want 40% concentration in any business. Or if I did buy it, I would restructure the deal and put a lot more emphasis on an earnouts, owner staying on board, tying it to that particular relationship and growing and keeping that business. Where before, again, first buy, just not as diligent. So would I buy it again, knowing what happened? 100%. But if you gave me the same business with a different name and with the same attributes, I don't know that I would buy that business today in a different market with the same attributes.
Got it. Was there anything, obviously you learn on the diligence side of things. You do one deal, you do two deals, you start to ask new questions, and that list starts to expand. Was there anything that you did on that initial deal that you may have gotten burned with in terms of diligence? Hey, we should have asked this, and we didn't. Shame on us. If that potentially could have burned you, maybe it did or it didn't with this particular deal. But is there something you learned along the way in terms of diligence that you're like, the aha moment, like we need to make sure we're asking these questions along the way?
I think there's a couple things we've learned a lot, that deal specifically. So they were not on a bonus program. They weren't giving annual raises or increases. They had a lot of longevity. So there was a big cost of bringing people onto our system, both from a benefits and a comp perspective. Deal one, again, that wasn't a big diligence item of ours. I would say the other two is TPA related. So as a buyer, I want to know if you're doing TPA work, who you're doing it with. Here's the TPA that you're getting the business with. And on top of that, which carriers are you getting work from and which programs within those carriers? As an example, you could have one carrier that can have 7 different programs. Why are you on those or why are you not on those? And that's one thing we didn't ask. And then same thing with the 40% customer. We found out later, we just assumed we were getting most of their business because they'd been a driver for 10 years. We found out they were only doing construction work. And it was a heavy construction business because of the one customer, right? And they were only doing large jobs. We found out literally like 18 to 24 months later, like, why the heck aren't we getting small jobs? Why aren't we getting mid jobs? Like the EBITDA profile was lower than what we were accustomed to seeing, but it was because they were only getting repairs. Well, we found out the customer didn't know that we wanted to do mid and didn't know we wanted to do small jobs and just assumed we wanted big jobs. So I think another level of diligence that we didn't do then that we're now doing on all of our deals moving forward.